So this recording, we will download it later today. It takes a while. It will be on our YouTube channel. That's the only place we can put it because the file's so big. So if you go to Realty One Group Southwest on YouTube, you will see our channel there, and you can go over and hear it again if you want. So, all right, let's get started here. So this is the buyer rep agreement, and it's our current one. And no doubt with the changes that are coming, they're going to have to change this form. So we're going to talk about it in its current state, but just know, and we'll talk about where we think it's going to change. And Felipe, I know you're on here. He and I talked about it, so he's going to pop in.
Hey, I'm here. Good morning.
Good morning, Felipe.
How's it going?
Good. I can barely hear you. Where's my volume? There we go. That's why. Oh, okay, I should be able to hear you now.
Yep.
Whoa, well, a little too loud. Like you, but not that loud. Okay, so here we go. So on the buyer rep agreement, as you know, with the NAR settlement, that once this goes into effect, which you're saying will be approximately mid-July, all of us think that's highly aggressive. Andy did the call on Thursday with me, and there's so many things that have to change before this new way of doing business is set in stone. And the biggest is going to be the lending guidelines, I think. Because right now, where does this leave a VA buyer? So all of those things will have to be worked out, as well as all the forms will have to be revised. So we don't know the exact timing, but I don't think it'll happen by July. So this buyer rep agreement will change, but so we'll talk about it in the way it's currently done. So you have the names where you will put the buyer or buyers that you are representing, and then you will put in the second line the name of the broker. You can do Realty One Group Southwest dash, your name if you want. That's fine, but remember the agreement is with the brokerage. Beginning on. So you have your date in which it starts. Your buyer rep agreement should be dated prior to an RPA. So if you think you're working with a buyer, you're going to be writing an offer, immediately upon representing them and showing them homes, you need to do the buyer rep agreement. This conversation will be much easier now because it was an elective form you didn't have to use. Well, now it's going to be mandatory. So you will tell your buyer that this form must and has to be used. So you will have the beginning date and you will have the ending, which is number of days now versus a date. So you will put that in there. You cannot and should not exceed 365 days as per DRE is what I have heard they want to see. So here's where your time period will be. Remember, what are two things you have to have for a contract? You have to have your beginning and end dates. So you have to specify that. So number 2 is no pre-existing. This is where the buyer will acknowledge that the buyer has not entered into another buyer rep agreement. So you will have to have that conversation with them. Property to be acquired. Here's the location. You can get down to specific address. You could do by city or you can do by county. Now I've heard from DRE auditors, they don't like if you put the state of California. So I would not do that. Price range. So they don't like a huge price swing either. So if they're looking for a house at $750,000, I would probably do $100,000 swing. If you're in a house that's $1 million or $2 million, I might do a 200 swing, 250 swing on that price range. Remember, if you have a buyer rep agreement and they purchase a home while having this buyer rep agreement, and it falls outside the parameters of paragraph 3, it's outside the parameters. It's no longer applicable. So you don't want to get it too tight, but also DRE doesn't like it, extremely broad either. 3B, you can go into the following specified properties only. That has been used a lot with the way that people have been using the buyer rep agreement now. That's not going to be the case probably going forward. The same thing with B or 3C, where you might take a list of homes that you're showing today or this week to the buyer. So this paragraph, the number 3s, I believe is going to change a lot in how it's identified and et cetera. So you probably won't have B and C. Compensation, the amount of real estate commission is not fixed by law. They are set by each broker. So our commissions have always been negotiable, still are, always will be. And we're in a much better position than brokerages that have a split, that have a franchise fee, that has a fix. I know that I work for brokerages, and if you took a listing less than 6%, the broker penalized you and took the variance off your commission to pay for the difference to get the listing up to 6%, so that the broker was paid whole. I think brokers that do that are going to be in real trouble. We don't do that. You are your own business. You are able to set your commission. You can negotiate what you want as long as your basic fees, are paid. So, let's see here. Let me see if I can scroll down. Why is this not scrolling? There we
And
go.
do you mind if I jump in for just a
Of
second
course,
before
go
we get
ahead,
into
Felipe.
compensation? Hey, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon if you're obviously in the East Coast like Lori, lucky. Quick question. What is the main reason people are afraid of using this form? If you've never used this form, and I'll be honest, I never used to use it either, why are we afraid to use this form? Somebody chime in. I know it's early, but come on. Somebody chime in. What's the main reason or the concern that we're afraid of utilizing this form? What are some of the key reasons? Why are we scared?
Client rejection.
Client rejection, that's one, right? We're afraid that they're going to say no, right? That they're going to say, "Oh my gosh." So we haven't learned how to utilize this form or sell our value. What else? No one else does, right? They can go somewhere else, right? So originally, maybe if I was too aggressive and I said, "Hey, you're going to sign this form with me." By the way, it's just changed recently, which it talks about compensation. But before right now, we were afraid that they would go somewhere else, right? So I think the mindset of when we were taking listings all day long, we're used to filling out that compensation form and having that conversation. So going back to, before we get in too much into compensation, I wanted to talk about that first section, because I think it's important to understand we have to get better at practicing how to use this form. And the best way to use this form, you guys, like Linda was just mentioning, if you go back to the days, there's a reason that it's not a set date of when it expires, because we don't want to scare people away. There's absolutely nothing wrong with doing a BRBC for 30 days. 7 days. Hey, Linda, we need to figure out if we're going to be able to work well together. And I'm not trying to scare her away and lock her in for 2 years at a time here. Let's do a 30-day BRBC. Let's figure this out. Let's see how this works. Does that make sense? So again, we can extend this later if we have to. We can also cancel, which she's going to talk about today, but there's nothing wrong with setting it. Hey, you know what? This is just for 30 days. We're going to figure this out. We're going to see how well we work together. We're going to help you find your dream home. Okay. So just going back to that days, it's actual days that you have to put in days after. Okay. Then the next thing is the property. Go ahead, Linda.
I was just going to say, excellent point. Absolutely.
And then number 2 is huge too, because number 2 talks about pre-existing agreements. So as you're getting better scripting this dialogue, we're going to go into number 2. And Linda, I'm really wanting to make sure that you're not already committed to paying compensation for another agent. Do you have, or have you signed any of these before? This is a great opportunity for you guys to talk about that. Okay. It's how you present it. Then number 3, What Linda mentioned was, don't put, as long as they buy something in the United States. I mean, come on, guys, right? We have to dial it down. We all know that we live and we work here usually in the city of Temecula, Murrieta, Menifee, Hemet, San Jacinto, whatever. So what if you just put in counties? What if you just put in, as long as you purchase something in Riverside or San Diego or Orange County, you can do that as well. Okay. Don't feel that you have to put an address. Again, another thing that, by the way, you don't technically, you don't have to put a dollar amount. You don't have to put the dollar amount. You could put in the county of Riverside County. If they find something in Riverside or San Diego County and you have procuring cause, you're gonna get compensated. All right. So I just wanted to make sure we talked a little bit about that before we dive into compensation.
Mhm.
So I don't mean to jump in too much there, Linda. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. No, you know what? It's great. Okay,
I
so
have a quick question about that. Because they have that dollar amount there, I find that really interesting. In Idaho, these are just you cannot talk to a client without having them sign this. You can't even sit down with them. So everyone has to do it. I think all those insecurities we have about what the buyers not wanting to sign them are going to go away real fast because everybody has to do it. But I'm just curious why they have this dollar amount thing even in there, because in Idaho, you don't have to list a city or area. You don't have to list a dollar amount. You just have to disclose that this is an agreement it's an employment agreement. You're employing me to work for you as your broker. So
And
do
and
you
this is
have
why
to put
Linda's
in?
talking about that they're probably going to make some changes to this form,
yes,
because I
Okay,
agree with you 100%. The dollar amount, honestly, I don't even put it in there. Just put
right.
the county. As long as they're looking in Riverside County, for example, just don't make it too detailed and don't make it too ambiguous where it's like, oh, the United States of America, or as long as they purchase within $600,000 to $800,000. We're bottlenecking it ourselves. They're probably going to adjust this form, but for right now, I suggest just put a county.
Okay.
yeah, yeah. So, now this form does default, if you go down to 4B1, it does default to non-exclusive representation. So you don't want that. You will want to check 4B2, exclusive representation. And that says this agreement shall be exclusive and irrevocable. Broker will devote time and resources to assist buyer in finding and acquiring the property and expects to be paid. So that's what you want to make sure that you check that box. Now, when you check 4B2, you need to go down to C2, which I have highlighted, if checked, and only if paragraph 4B2 applies. Neither party shall have the right to cancel this agreement prior to expiration except by mutual agreement. You need to check those two boxes. That's why they're highlighted. So make a copy of this, keep it around. Again, once this form changes, we'll do classes and workshops again. We will be digging deep into all of this at Masterminds Wednesday at 3 o'clock. If you haven't RSVP'd, I highly encourage you to, because we're having great talking points at these meetings and talking about how we're going to communicate to the consumer, both seller and buyer. So I highly advise that all of us, all of you are there. So make sure that you read 4B2 and 4C2 and know that those are the two boxes. I mean, go ahead and read 4B1 and you'll see it's non-exclusive representation. So we don't want that. So then you go down, you have accounting for payments. This is all well and good. And then you get down to E, additional broker. Broker shall be entitled to compensation provided for in paragraph 4A within X amount of calendar days. Well, this is the safety net, much like you have in the listing agreement. So this is where you can provide the buyer a list of addresses of homes that are protected so that you can get paid. Okay, so with this, you have to do it within X amount of calendar days after expiration or cancellation of the buyer broker agreement. So you want to make sure that you get those names sent over and they have them. So broker shall be entitled to compensation provided for in paragraph 4A if within X amount of calendar days after expiration of the representation agreement or extension thereof, if I lose the line here, if there is a cancellation after the effective date, buyers enters into to acquire property. So they entered into buying agreement. Maybe it's the one that you had shown them within your buyer broker time frame. So that's where you can protect yourself. So, and if a buyer did buy one of those homes and you did the protection clause within there, the buyer's obligated to pay you a commission, as well as that other agent, buyer's agent, will also receive a commission. So you want to make sure that your client understands that, you know, when you do this and you have the exclusive, that it is exclusive and that you're putting a lot of time, effort, and energy into working with them. So, okay, I'm going through here. I'm looking at questions as we go. Okay, just comments, not questions. So Felipe, any input on any of this? Because I love your angle on it, because
No,
you
no,
and
for
I
sure.
are very, different and have a different way about it, and I love the way you do it.
No, for sure, for sure. I think one of the biggest challenges for realtors right now is we don't understand how to fill this out. So if you scroll back up just a little bit, because we talked about paragraph 4 where compensation goes, but I don't know if everybody knows how to fill this out, right? So here's something to consider. Once you establish what your value is, whether you're worth 2%, 3%, 2.5%, 4A, we kind of glanced over it, paragraph number 4A1. So this is where you put in the percent that you're
Right.
requesting from the buyer. So here's what I've been recommending, okay? You guys can change it up, you can do whatever you want to do. However, I think it's very important that you guys understand your value, and the best way to do that, there's a new form since this came out, it's called the BTA, the buyer transaction advisory. That actually spells out the buyer's, value prop. Okay, it's a good understanding of your value prop. So what I suggest, and again, you can take this any other way, 4A1 is where you're going to put, for example, 2.5%. Okay, 2.5% and $0. So you have to put something there. So I would put 2.5%. You may want to put 2% or 3%. That's totally up to you. All right. So just for sake of purpose of this class, I would put 2.5%. Now, what does this mean? We didn't go over. Go down to 4B or 4D, Linda, if you don't mind. So here's the reality of how this is going to work as far as compensation. So there's 3 paragraphs on here. What happens if I submit an offer and I have a BRBC with a buyer? I'm supposed to check an extra box, right, Linda, on the RPA?
Yes, the G3, and we'll go over that.
And that's on paragraph D3. We're going to talk about that in a second. But paragraph D1 clearly states that if anybody else, i.e. the seller, offers compensation for services covered by this agreement, that amount shall be credited towards the buyer's obligation. So in other words, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, if we find that your dream home, we submit an offer, I will let you know if they're offering compensation, okay? Which could wipe out what they're going to owe me, right? So what if the MLS is paying 3% and my BRBC says 2.5%? What if there's extra money in there? Then you go to paragraph 4D2. This is all defaulted, by the way. If the third-party payment on the MLS exceeds the buyer's obligation, the excess amount will be paid automatically by default to the broker. So you don't have to do anything. You're automatically going to get that excess as of today, the way the BRBC sits today. Okay? So then what if, and this is the big question, Linda, I have a BRBC that says 2.5%. The MLS is paying 1%. What do I do there? Right? I know that's a question agents are asking right now. And this is where you guys have to understand this is your business, as Linda said. It's a business decision. You can choose to accept the lower amount from the MLS and not charge the difference to the buyer. It's a business decision. Okay. So that's where you guys say, hey guys, we're going to find your dream home. Let's see what's going on. Most properties are still paying compensation to this day. But those 3 sentences right there are the key things that I want you guys to make note of in regards to payment of compensation. So if there's extra, it's going to automatically go to you. If the seller's paying compensation, paragraph, little sentence number 3 right there basically states that we're going to check the box and do an SPBB, which Linda's going to talk about in a second.
Yep.
Okay.
Very good point. So, let's see. Okay, we'll go down additional broker. I think we've covered that. That's the safety clause. So like Felipe is going through these numbers, this is going to change, but I think some of that verbiage, like where you get paid automatically, or it goes towards the buyer's obligation of what they're paying you if the seller is offering. So we'll see and how the seller and listing agent will be able to communicate if there's a broker co-op. We don't know yet. We do know that as it stands right now, if Troy takes a listing here in Temecula and it's at our office here, he can tell all of our agents via our Facebook page, our email blast, etc., that the seller is offering a broker co-op, much like what the builder does. So how far that will go, when we had the call with the attorney on Friday, I mean, can we do it on a sign? Can we do a rider that says broker co-op? Can we put it on our Facebook page? I think right now the answer is no, but we need to get clarity on all of the parameters. And right now, I think a lot of it too, we're trying to listen to what they're saying, and it's up to our interpretation real fast of what we're being told. Felipe, do you have anything on that you feel? Have you talked about it with your agents for doing things like a broker co-op on a sign?
Yeah, no, I mean, that really hasn't come up out there. So, I mean, we haven't really discussed it. At the end of the day, nothing else has really changed. Okay. So these
Correct.
things and everything that Linda's talking about as far as like the July 24th date, honestly, you guys, nothing's going to happen until next year. Let's just be real, right? These changes aren't going to come down till next year. We just have to do a little bit better. We have to position ourselves in a better way to make sure that we understand how to get used to doing buyer presentations,
Mhm.
just like if we did a listing presentation. But no, we haven't changed anything in regards to signage or anything like that. Or I saw some clever things on social media that some of you guys posted about. This is a wonderful 3-bedroom. Three bath. That's pretty funny. So we haven't changed anything along those lines because most sellers are still offering compensation right now.
Right.
And nothing is deterring you guys, even with this rule change, from asking the seller to compensate for commission using the CBC form.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. We have a question. Can we start a separate website off of the MLS where agents can go to view the commission offered? I can't answer that. I don't know. I don't know what will be allowed. Right now, like Felipe's saying, everything's status quo. Nothing
Right.
has changed yet. So remember that. But you will have your sellers and your buyers asking you these questions. So you need to tell them this is something that, we don't know when it will become effective. However, this is, you'll discuss how you're going to do it. If the seller doesn't want to pay a commission, that's a seller strategy. Those are the talking points that we're going to be hitting on at our masterminds. What are your talking points going to be with that seller if that's what they want to do? So far, I'm hearing from almost every agent that has gone out on a listing presentation, the sellers clearly understands and feels that this new way of doing business will damage them and limit their buyer pool. So every seller will have a different angle or a take on it. So that's why it's so important for each and every one of us to be prepared for those conversations. And that's why we're going to be doing all these. Really, it's going to be role playing and conversations. So any questions on that? Nothing? Okay, we'll go on down here to the next page, disclosure of anticipated payments. On F, broker prior to writing an offer, or if checked prior to showing a property, which I would check that box, will disclose to buyer the amount of compensation broker expects to receive from a third party on that property. Either it's now it says a copy of the MLS listing. Well, that will be going away. A separate document such as an anticipated broker commission, or it could be the seller's payment to buyer broker agreement. So this paragraph will also have to change a little bit, but it's where you have disclosure. Right now, we do have, if you represent a buyer, it's required that the commission instructions from escrow be initialed or signed by the buyer. That is the acknowledgement. That is a protection clause that we have set up for you. That was highly recommended that we start doing 2.5 years ago by DRE auditors and consultants. And that will protect you if they come back and say, hey, well, Sherry didn't tell me she was getting paid this much and I should have known, and et cetera, et cetera. So this is where we have full disclosure. So, and that's why we do that. Let's see, a copy of the MLS, a separate document. Buyer independently or through escrow will disclose the final compensation, which is what we already do. So they will receive that. Buyer is responsible for payment of compensation if the third party doesn't pay. So that's where you're talking about in paragraph 4, and that will be defined. Again, that paragraph is going to change. So upon completion, compensation is payable at the close of escrow. If acquisition is prevented by default upon buyer's default, if acquisition is prevented by a party to the transaction other than the buyer, when buyer collects damages. So maybe the seller defaulted and didn't close, and then the buyer goes after damages and fees, then you can possibly receive 1/2 of the damages recovered, not to exceed the compensation provided for in the agreement. So you can't, if they end up getting damages and they're awarded $100,000, you're not going to get 50. You can only receive what you would have received based on your parameters defined in paragraph 4. So does that make sense to everybody? Because a lot of times buyers will have damages. Maybe they lost their rate lock. Maybe they moved out of a home and they had to go someplace else. So it could be, depends on damages. Payment through escrow. So it's just like, again, it's like the listing agreement, everything, it goes through escrow. So now if you do a buyer broker agreement, that has to go to escrow so they know how to pay. And so now this will be a mandatory document when all of this changes. I may go ahead and put it on there now and not make it a required document so you can start getting used to it. Pre-existing buyer representation. If buyer acquires a property during the time buyer is obligated to compensate another broker identified in paragraph 2, broker is neither entitled to compensation. So this is where they have defined, yes, we have signed a buyer broker agreement for the city of Temecula. They didn't go to the county of Riverside, so they may have done it that way. So what is that parameter? That's what, you'll have to find out, get a copy of the agreement and see. So they could have 2 buyer broker agreements, but the parameters are different. So you'll want to watch for that. So this is just your agency relationships, which y'all know what that is. your broker authorizations. I'm not going to go into all of that. You guys know what this is. This hasn't changed. We'll go down here. This is what we were talking about on the purchase agreement. So let's say right now you have a buyer that you're working with, and the seller has put on MLS compensation $1. You go out and this is the perfect home for your buyer. You still want to get paid. This is where you will go in and you will check G3. When you check G3, it means that you've also signed a buyer broker agreement with your client. You have to have done that. And then you will use this form. And it has the date, the property, buyer, seller, and then you identify down here in 1, 2, 3, what your payment will be, your charge. Buyer representation with compensation. Buyer has entered into a written agreement to compensate buyer's broker 3% of the sales price, or if checked, flat fee. We're seeing more flat fees right now than I've seen in a long time. Or you can go to 2, compensation from seller's broker to buyer as of the date. This seller payment for buyer's broker document is signed by buyer and pursuant to MLS. Seller's broker has agreed to pay buyer's broker. So this is if it's in the MLS. And then you have 3, seller payment to buyer broker shall not be greater than the amount in paragraph 1. So this is where you have identified what it will be. So maybe you put in here 3%, or you put in 2%, and let's see here, minus seller agrees to pay buyer broker 3% of the purchase price, or if checked, you put the percentage in there. So I think most of the time, Felipe, you can step in and help, because these always get so confusing. You
Sure.
do the buyer rep agreement.
Sure.
You're going to put whatever amount you want in one, what you're expecting to be paid.
So to keep it simple for everybody, there's 1, 2, and 3. Number 1, what does your BRBC say? You put that amount in number 1. Number 2, what does the MLS say? Number 3 is where you're going to put the difference, right? So number 1, how much did you already have a BRBC that says something with a buyer? So number 1, how much did you put in the BRBC? Just copy that information over. Number 2, what is the MLS showing for compensation? Number 3, what do we want to do about it? Is it less? Is it more? Are we keeping it? Are we not? So that's how you fill this out. I think that, obviously reading this, as Linda has mentioned in the past, is super important. But at the end of the day, the easiest way to fill this out is we got to keep it simple. So those are the 3 main items on this.
Yeah, this is a relatively new form. I think it just came out, what, a year ago? A year ago.
9 months, yeah.
So it's a relatively new form. So make sure you go through it. I don't know how much this form will change when they do, when everything goes into effect. So I don't know. So, and this is the CBC. I don't know which one will be more in play, because they both do the same thing.
So the way I would handle that is if I already have a BRBC, but I find a property that's offering 0 compensation from the seller on the MLS, I would go old school, communicate, or for you millennials, how do you guys do the phone? Like this now? I'm used to doing this. So I would pick up the phone, have a conversation with the listing agent, just like we do right now. And I would ask them if we could offer or can get some compensation, possibly submit a CBC prior to. But if you have the BRBC already set in place, which we should, then to answer Linda's question is we would go the route of the SPBB.
Yeah, seller's payment to buyer broker. So it'll be interesting to see if this one goes away.
I don't think so, because this will also allow you when there is compensation that you're changing in the ML. I mean, there's a bunch of different reasons to utilize this, right? So
yeah,
I think it'll go away.
Yeah, it'd be nice if they could mesh the 2 together, because I think there's overlap there. So those are the forms right now. So if you get into a situation where you have a seller and it's in the MLS right now and it's showing maybe 1%, $1, whatever, and you get into this, let us know and we can help you. I've only seen it one time. Do you see it down in your market, Felipe?
What's that? The dollar?
Yeah, the seller not offering. I've only seen it one time.
Haven't seen it. We have had 2 instances over the weekend already where sellers came to the listing agent and said, "Hey, I heard I don't have to pay commission anymore. Can I cancel my agreement?" So this is why it's so important to be prepared, you guys. Don't be afraid of the conversation. We just sat down and we said, "Well, actually, let me explain to you what's going on, right? This is something that's new. It hasn't happened yet." And we were able to convince them and make them understand that they already had a written agreement, so we got them both in escrow, thank goodness. But these conversations are going to come up because people are not sure. So we need to do a better job just being prepared, you guys.
Yeah, and that's why we're going to do the role playing so that we can role play the conversation, between buyer and agent, seller to agent. That's why if we keep role playing this, by the time things come into play, we will be so well versed and you will have objection handlers already ingrained in your head. So that's what our goal is to continue to do these. So Wednesday we will start with that, and then we will schedule probably every other week a role-playing class on how to have these conversations. And I will break it out by buyer side versus seller side for you guys. So hopefully that will help. But I think this is just so important to have you be empowered with knowledge of what we currently have and then prepare for what's coming. So, okay. Any questions? You guys are very quiet today. We have another good group today. I'm surprised.
No questions. They're taking it easy on us, Linda.
I know.
I said that because I know that.
So just here comes a question. So just to be clear, ... Just type in. You guys can unmute. You guys can chime in.
Yeah, you can unmute yourself.
I'll just unmute myself instead of writing this question.
There you go, Annie.
Sorry, I do type fast, but not fast enough. Okay, so, so now we're using the buyer broker agreement, which I think is great. We should be, we should be using that, obviously. So we're gonna use that now along with the, I don't remember what it's called, the seller's whatever thing.
Seller's payment to buyer broker.
Yes, so we're gonna use both of those right now. If for some reason we don't use a buyer broker agreement, shame on us, but if we don't, then we would use the CBC. Is that correct?
I mean, I could, if I can, Linda, I can answer.
Yeah,
that
go
real
ahead.
quick. So the BRBC is just for your protection right now, so that we don't get cheated on, as Rami put in the chat. Also because we're just getting used to it, right? If you don't utilize the BRBC, if the MLS is offering compensation, then you're fortunate, you're lucky, you're good to go. If you want to ask for compensation and you don't have a BRBC, then you would technically want to utilize a CBC.
Correct.
Okay,
That's a lot of acronyms for a Monday.
I know, right?
Does that make sense though, Annie? So
Absolutely,
basically,
yeah.
the CBC still exists. We can use it if we wanted to, as if nothing had changed. If you're going about your day, you have a buyer and they say, "Hey, I want to offer on this property," and you notice that they're paying 1%, you're like, "Man, that sucks. I'm going to call the agent like we normally do. Hey, what's up? Why are we offering 1%? Blah blah blah. Can we get with a strong offer? Yeah, go ahead, submit what you want." So that means you would submit the CBC. The BRBC, again, we're just trying to highlight how to best utilize it moving forward. And it's highly recommended to protect ourselves because the days of us working for free with the buyer are done, right? We don't do that anymore.
Right, great. Okay, thank you.
Cool.
Okay. All right, you guys, any other questions? Nothing. Wow, you guys are very quiet today. So.
We can't say free. Exactly. We don't work for free.
Yeah, exactly. And you don't. So, all right, you guys, thank you very much. I appreciate it. If you have questions, you know, you can always email us, let us know. If we don't have the answer, we'll get right back to you. This is a moving target. And we will try to keep you posted as best we can as we go. I would highly encourage you to come to our role-playing sessions. The last buyer broker agreement, excuse me, masterminds meeting that we did, we talked about seller strategies and offering of commissions or not. And it was an excellent masterminds, excellent. So I think that this week's masterminds will be even better. So I look forward to seeing y'all there. All right. You guys have a wonderful day and let us know if you have questions. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Linda. That was awesome.
You're welcome. Thank you, Felipe.
I think he's gone. All right. We'll see you Wednesday, Linda. Thanks.
Okay, bye-bye. Take care.